Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Amma ba'd. Ahabati fillah. The question was posed. Assalamu alaikum, Ustad. I hope you are well. My question pertains to the matun, meaning the text to memorize. One of my teachers told me that Aqidah and Tawheed should be studied first. Books like Nawaqid al-Islam, Qawaid al-Arba, Usul al-Thalatha, Kitab al-Tawheed, Lum' al-I'tiqad, Qawaid al-Muthla, and Aqidat al-Wasatiyah. These are books which will suffice the beginner in Aqidah and Tawheed. I follow the Matun books by Sheikh Qahtani, and there are books of Tawheed, Tajweed, prayer, fiqh, hadith. What I'm confused about is, should I keep memorizing the Matun and focus on finishing the Aqidah books, or do Aqidah slowly while also doing another book in the Matun that I've already memorized? My Arabic isn't strong, so I wanted to memorize, and then I learn Arabic, start the other metans. I hope my question is clear. But first and foremost, the bottom line is what works for you. That's number one. And what you're able to do. Some people can memorize several texts at one time. Some people, they have to focus on one text so as not to become confused. So it depends on what your qudra, what your ability is. Secondly, my personal preference would be not that you memorize all of those Aqidah books and then you start other books, but rather that you start with something like Usul al-Thalatha and finish it, and then start a book like Umdat Ahkam. So that way you've already built yourself a base of text which will open a sea worth of masail and issues that you'll already have the evidence for, and you'll be familiar with the dalail wa masail. You'll be familiar with the evidences and the actual issues and how they are and how those great imams use the evidences, the textual nusus, along with the issues that they were relevant for. And so I would recommend, and there's many different ways, and I don't say there's a right way and a wrong way, and I don't think you'll find that necessarily from the ulama that they will say that, that you don't necessarily sit and memorize a series of Aqidah books, but rather, especially at the beginning, get yourself one text like Usul al-Thalatha, which is a nice comprehensive text regarding Rububiyyah and Uluhiyyah, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah wa Uluhiyyah, but not as much regarding al-Asma'i wa Sifat. But it deals with a lot of other masail in Aqidah, even issues of al-Wala wal-Bara and others. It's a very comprehensive book. So it's a very a shorter text and an easier text to memorize, and it is comprehensive, so very important. And then with that, either alongside that, while you're memorizing that, Umdata Fiqh, Umdata 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 al-Ahkam. And that is a very important text because, again, that's going to give you a hadith, an excellent comprehensive survey of the Masail and Fiqh with hadith evidences. And if you memorize that book alone with strength and confidence, you'll pretty much, someone asks you a question about most of the general Masail and Fiqh, you'll have evidence for it. Is water pure? Qala al-Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Whatever the case may be, the sifat of salat, hajj, everything to jihad fi sabilillah, it's there. So that is an excellent book to memorize, especially if you can memorize it in totality. Those two texts will take you a long way, and then supplement it with other texts. And again, there are many different ways to do it, but I wouldn't advise myself to go and spend all that time just memorizing all those Aqidah texts and neglecting other texts even for the time being, but rather complement complement those, those different funun, those different sciences, and by memorizing something from that and something from that. Or you could even go Arba'in an-Nawawi, which is also a comprehensive text. We're not going to give you necessarily ahkam, fiqh, necessarily that type of fiqh as we understand ahkam, but it's going to give you, evidence for issues in aqidah and manners and adab. So it's also absolutely a very important text. So that's what I would advise, is going through and getting a text in each fin. And this is what I've read from some of the ulama when they mention this, that a person should try to memorize a text in every science. And that gives you, you would be surprised the foundation that a person stands on when they've memorized and they have studied those texts. Because really, when you think about it, a lot of people who have self-studied, or even if they've sat with ulama and stuff like this, a lot of times they don't have that kind of strength. And I'm talking about du'at necessarily more so in the West than the East, because if you go to traditional societies that have Muslim societies like Somalia, or different places in Africa, on the African continent, or in the Arab world, or Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, what have you, that they have a background in fiqh, and they started when they were young memorizing text, some of them. So they already have a very strong foundation, even if a person is not knowledgeable, meaning they don't have much fiqh in understanding of those texts, but they started when they were children. So a lot of times we suffer from a lack of memorization. We have more and more tulab al-ilm, walillah alhamd, that have went out and have studied and benefited. One thing I will definitely give props to, for lack of better words, is those students, tulab al-ilm, especially that studied in places like Yemen. Some of them, because that was an environment, especially coming out of Damaj and those other marakis al-ilm, that they focus on memorization a lot, that they have the time and they have the tafarrug, they're away from society. And so you find, in those places, you find strength of hifz. And of course, one of the most important things, and people who've studied there will have much more knowledge about that, but what you see as far as ulama that come out of places like Mauritania, which is in Africa, by the way, they're on a whole nother level, even compared to a lot of our Salafi scholars in Sardinia. As far as memorization, they're on a whole nother level. And for example, I'll give you an example. Even some people who are not known for Sunnah, but they live in Sardinia, that are from Mauritania, they're, as far as their memorization, they're on a whole nother level, because they, started out in the desert memorizing the Quran at 5 type, and by 10 years old, and other texts and grammar. And one example I'll give you is, if you look at Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar Shanqiti, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, who's one of the Kibar Ulama, major scholars here in Saudi Arabia. He's on the Hayat Kibar Ulama. And Imam Abdul Muhsin al-Abbad, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, Muhaddith in Medina, it was related to me that he said that he's an ayah in fiqh when speaking about Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar. And if you've ever sat in his durus, and I've sat in some of his durus, and when he talks about the Salaf and when he talks about Masail, he's on a whole nother level because of his memorization. I mean, it's like a computer. It's like the whole, it's not like you're studying in a pond, but you're studying in the ocean. He's bringing Masail and aqwal of the ulama, like from hifz, the Shafi'iyah said this, the Hanafiya said this, the Hanabila said this, and Imam so-and-so said, he's given you, and it's off cap. So this comes with the strength in hifz. So hifz is very important, and it's something that a lot of our Western students, some of them, they really lack. Some of them have that, And I will be first and foremost to say that I don't even consider myself really a student of knowledge, and that I very much lack in that. But I understand the importance of that, of memorization. So what I would say, and I have many colleagues who are in Yemen, who are in Damaj and spent years, some spent at least 12 years there. And the last visits that I had with some of them, they were on a whole nother level, especially as far as memorization and those masail and so on and so forth. And depends on what they focus. If they focused on the Arabic grammar, one particular brother, and I won't mention his name because he's a shy brother, but he spent about 12 years in Damaj, and we went together at the same time, but he lived there. And he, was known for his grammar, and known for, that's something that he focused on. And so those brothers, they come out with a type of strength that is reflected in their lessons and in their teachings. And we ask Allah the Almighty to accept our good and forgive our evil. Sallallahu alaihi wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.